Since the COVID lockdowns, many are taking a second look at their mental health, but is a therapist really the answer? With many pushing certain agendas, the idea of hiring one is unappealing for some, but my next guest may have a solution. For more, we turn to Dr. Chloe Carmichael, licensed psychologist and best-selling author of Nervous Energy, Harness the Power of Your Anxiety. Thanks so much for joining us. So before we get into the matchmaking concept of finding a therapist, if you will, let's talk about the state of so many here in the U.S. It seems the COVID lockdowns isolated a number of people. Do you think that's partly why so many are seeing a decline in their mental well-being?
Yes, definitely, Natasha, because psychologists know that social support is a very important factor for mental health. And so when we isolate people and keep them from, say, getting together and, going to church or going to work or doing all the things Americans like to do, of course, it's going to present challenges.
Absolutely. And so how does someone know if seeking out a clinical psychologist is right for them?
Well, that can be a tough one. So, in my book, Nervous Energy, Harness the Power of Anxiety, I actually have an entire chapter about choosing a therapist because it can really be a very fraught decision. You need to interview the therapist and find out from them how they feel about working with somebody in your situation. For example, I've had clients who say, oh, well, I went to this therapist looking for help and they wanted to label me as toxically masculine or whatever. And so the therapist's own ideology can sometimes really shape the treatment itself.
Definitely makes sense. And what are some mistakes to avoid when seeking out therapy?
Studies have shown that actually the fit between you and the therapist is sometimes the most important predictor of therapeutic success. So the mistake to avoid would be to go to one or two people and then just choose one of them, even if what they're saying or doing doesn't feel right to you. I would encourage you to make sure that you keep looking and don't assume that just because somebody has a bunch of letters behind their name that they're actually really qualified to guide you.
It's a really good point because even with a regular doctor, it's always encouraged to get a second opinion, and so it would make sense for a psychologist, same kind of thing. And so, can you tell us some different things that people should know about the psychologist before they start to pay for actual sessions?
Absolutely. So I would, first of all, obviously want to make sure that the person is licensed. Believe it or not, these days with so many people hanging out at Shingle on the internet, it's almost hard to tell. You might also want to ask, for example, how many people have you worked with before that had an issue like mine? How long did treatment typically take with those people? Another question I think is really important to ask is, will you be giving me homework at each session? And if yes, will you follow up with me about it at the beginning of each session, or is that my job? And I actually train other therapists, and I've seen that one of the issues that some therapists fall into is I think they're just overworked. They're seeing too many clients and they assign homework and then they forget about it and they try to make it seem like it's the client's responsibility to bring it up. Whereas because a lot of issues actually have to do with avoidance, it's very important that the therapist seems eager and enthusiastic to really partner with you.
And actually following up with them, like you mentioned, and kind of being, a life coach, kind of holding them accountable for something that they really don't really want to talk about, but it might help get to the, end root of whatever is bothering them. So how do you match people to the best psychologist to their needs?
Natasha, I just have to say you touched on something important there, which is the element of personal responsibility, that people really do have the empowerment to be able to take actions to change things. And it's important that they understand that. As far as how we find the right therapist to match our needs, it's definitely a process of research, right? So you can go to Psychology Today or, ZocDoc.com or a lot of, the American Psychological Association. Although, again, I hesitate to really point anyone to one particular place. You can also ask your friends and family who they trust. Many churches also have, religious faith-based counseling services, and religiosity has been shown to be a protective factor in psychology as well. So I would encourage people to really look around and then interview carefully, speak to at least 3 people, and make sure that you've got someone that really feels right for you.
Yeah, that would be powerful for the psychologist to have the same set of values as their client, absolutely. Dr. Chloe Carmichael, licensed psychologist and author, thank you so much for joining us on One American News.
Thanks, Natasha.